Some of the most interesting arguments and conversations are talked about among philosophers. And although all of them will take you down massive rabbit holes like what is right or wrong or how should you make objective decisions, I think the one that most people are interested in is free will. And I think that's because you don't have to watch a lecture or read a book to understand the concept. We all feel like we have free will, but let's take a deep dive into what free will actually is. Today, I'm going to focus on one aspect of free will, and that is against it. I'll talk about determinism, neuroscience. At the end, I'll talk about moral responsibility, and I'm getting most of my information from Kant, Nietzsche, and Schopenhauer. Might be pronouncing this one wrong, but Pereboom. Now, most philosophers argue about different types of free will because they have different definitions. Like Kant believes that you have some decision making, but a lot of it is influenced by outside or external factors. And other philosophers think that we have free will all the time, no matter what the decision is. But most philosophers agree on just a couple points, so here are the ones that I'm going to be basing my entire argument off of. One is I'm the true origin of my actions. Two is in the exact same conditions I could have done otherwise. And three is I'm ultimately responsible for what I do. But skeptics argue that once you bring in causation, psychology, and logic, this concept or free will thing kind of falls apart. It doesn't work anymore. Now, if the world is deterministic, meaning every single action that you made no difference, or perhaps maybe every action was influenced by things prior. For instance, you choose between Coke and Pepsi. Maybe you grew up on Pepsi and that's why you have some kind of bias towards it. In a simpler way to explain it, if you didn't choose the initial conditions of the world, like you didn't choose the laws of nature, yet you follow both of those things on a day-to-day basis, like eating and drinking in most of your productive day, then do you really have free will? Schopenhauer famously said, "Men can do what he wills, but cannot will what he wills." For instance, you can go on this tangent where you chose Pepsi, and you say, well, why'd you choose Pepsi? And you say something along the lines of, oh, well, I've always liked it. And you go, why'd you always like it? You always get down to something that's external. For instance, I grew up on Pepsi. So then you didn't really will your will. That goes with literally any will. I chose to get these headphones. Well, why'd I get these headphones? Well, one of my friends have them. That's now external. I didn't really choose it. I just know they're already good because of one of my friends. But if you did choose your will, then what made you will that will? And what made you will that will? And will that will? It just goes all the way down into an infinite chain until it leads to something external. In simpler terms, your actions are fully determined by prior causes. Although I really think determinism is the way you should think about free will, what if it's not real? What if there is no determinism? Does that save this idea of free will? Now, oh my god, the philosopher Dirk Pereboom, he says that even if determinism isn't true, it doesn't influence free will at all. And he takes an interesting approach in saying that we lack all of the knowledge, we lack all of the control to be morally responsible for our actions. And he goes through this with a really interesting thought experiment. Let's just say that you're a judge, and on one side you have a man who is kidnapped by neuroscientists and fed chemicals to rob a bank. Should he be held responsible? Obviously not. But then that leaves these small little holes for what I'm going to bring up next. Okay, what if the neuroscientists raised him to believe that the only way to survive is to rob a bank? Should he be held responsible? The answer is still no. What about a child born into poverty, and his parents tell him that the only way to survive out in this world is to rob things and sell them? Now, that might sound like I'm just going on a tangent, but these are real things that happen. He didn't choose his genes, nor did he choose his parents. He didn't choose his upbringing or his environment, and he thought that he had to make those decisions. In 2022, most state prisoners grew up in poverty. And adults who experience poverty before going to prison are 2.7 times more likely to go back. Environment and upbringing really do matter and make a big part of your decision making. You don't have free will, and so you shouldn't be held responsible for your moral actions. Now, although I still disagree with this because I do think that being held responsible for actions, even if you didn't make them, is a redirection into thinking differently. And maybe in a way, it sort of picks fun at this idea that we have no free will, because it shows you that maybe all of this is still up to us, just like kind of like what Kant says, where you still make the decision. I could stand up in this chair right now, I could take off these headphones, I could do anything at this moment and just choose to. Whether it was conflicted or inflicted by external causes, I still at the end of the day chose to do it. Okay, the thought experiment sounds crazy, but we kind of do this all the time. People with mental illnesses, which they did not choose, and just like Kant's experiment, just like Kant's idea of free will, we still choose our actions. But somebody with a mental illness didn't choose to have a mental illness, and they made an action based off of it. Okay, outside of the mental illness, at the end of the day, a normal person without mental illness or without any external causes, right, can still choose to just stand up. But that brings us back to the same question that I earlier faced. You can't choose your will. If you will to stand up, what made you will that will? Was it me talking about it? Now it's external. Everything will lead to an external cause. When you're playing ping pong, your body actually doesn't know where the ball's going to move. It moves too fast for your eyes to actually send the signal to your brain. Your brain chooses where you're going to hit before your eyes can even see it based off the information it has. So at the end of the day, you didn't really choose even where you were hitting in ping pong, let alone choose something like a drink or to stand up or what classes to take in college. So now there's kind of a trap. If determinism is true, then all of your actions were predetermined. So no free will. If determinism is false, your actions involve randomness, and randomness is not free will. If you have an argument for these two topics, you should really put them in the comments because I'm going to make a video about the other side of free will. Now I'm going to talk about hard determinism. People that think that determinism is the only way to think about free will. Free will is incompatible with determinism. So hard determinists say that free will is not a thing. Not in any single way. Like Kant sort of agrees, other people sort of agree. They think free will is not a thing. Schopenhauer and Spinoza fall into this camp. Spinoza even goes as far to say that we're only ignorant of our prior choices. Spinoza even goes as far to say that we're ignorant to the causes of our actions. Schopenhauer says, your motives choose you, not the other way around. Incompatibilism goes even farther. Even if determinism is false, we still lack moral responsibility, just like I talked about earlier. I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Strawson's basic argument shows it even more clearly. To be responsible for what you do, you have to be responsible for the way you are. But to be responsible for the way you are, you'd have to choose it. But that choice would require an earlier self. And then that one requires an earlier self, and that one requires an earlier self, and it just goes on infinitely. You'd have to create yourself from nothing, which is impossible. Some philosophers say that free will is just an illusion. Daniel Wegner argued that the feeling of willing is just a mental construction. Kind of like what I talked about earlier, neuroscientists discovered that our brain predetermines our actions before we even think we're about to do it. For instance, you ever have this sudden countdown before you get up in the morning? Or wake up without your alarm on the weekend, but you woke up at the same time you usually wake up? Your brain always prepares you. Just like the ping pong idea. You don't actually choose where your hand's going to go. Your eyes can't even see where the ping pong is. Your brain just tells you that it's going to be within these three vicinities, and as it comes closer, it realizes, okay, it's probably this one, just off of the tiny bit of knowledge that it gets, because it can't see the ping pong going that fast. So how at the beginning I explained that we all feel like we have free will, but that doesn't really say or determine whether we actually have it. You think you have the choice to stand up, but you really don't. Okay, maybe you're religious. Even that doesn't save free will. The idea for most gods, and this doesn't go for every god, but the idea for most gods is that God is all-knowing, and he already knows the decision you're going to make. If God already knows the decision you're going to make, or at least all the decisions that you could make, then it's not really free will. God already has it predetermined for you. Nietzsche's argument is way crazier. He argues that free will was invented by us to understand guilt, and that we needed to punish people, and so to justify punishment, we had to think that they had the opportunity or the option of choosing whatever they did. If people aren't free, then they can't be blamed. He sees free will as almost like a tool for humanity, and not a metaphysical truth. After all of the arguments, there's a couple key takeaways that you can get from this video. Determinism removes free will. Indeterminism removes moral responsibility. Your upbringing shapes your behavior. Mental illnesses shape decisions. Neuroscientists. Philosophy really gives you all of the contradictions. But at the end of the day, you can still make the choice. So tell me what you think down in the comments, because I'm going to make another video about the flip side of free will. You should definitely like and subscribe. It is free and I just started, so it'd be really nice. Have a nice day.